Andros is the largest and wildest island of the Bahamas. Close to a deep ocean rift, its beaches of white sand are protected by the third largest coral barrier reef in the world, the largest in the Northern Hemisphere. At the beginning of the 1960s, a Canadian who was passionate about diving named Birch decided to settle on this then isolated island. Although the sport was little known at the time, he established the first diving centre in the Caribbean. Wanting to protect this environment that fascinated him, Birch created a small family-run facility which still maintains the principles of its founder.
My name is Jeff Birch, and I am the eldest son of the Birch clan. As far as Small Hope, we're, as far as I know, the oldest resort that has been built and run by the same family dedicated to diving. But what's more important is our philosophy of diving. When my father first started in 1960, what he believed was everybody in the world can dive, and it was his responsibility to ensure that they came here to Andros and saw the third largest barrier reef in the world. This philosophy continues today. Time stops in the mind when you're diving. No problem enters your mind. You are totally inundated with what you see and what you feel.
From the very start, the experience offered by Small Hope on the Coral Barrier Reef attracted many enthusiasts and explorers. Like Captain Cousteau, who came here and contributed to the international reputation of the Bahamas as an unmissable destination for all lovers of the ocean depths.
Being in business here at Small Hope for 50 years started with the first generation. And the first generation was my father and my mother, who were living in Canada. My father was written in, first of all, in 1962. He had the deepest record for diving. So he was quite an adventurer. He's jumped out of airplanes. He's crashed 3 planes. Not that he was a crazy man, but he was a type of person that lived life. And that's why we ended up here. One of the biggest things that has affected us, and he had 7 children between 3 wives, was a concern for the natural environment. And from day one when he came here, he drilled into us as kids that you have to care about the community, you have to care about the environment.
Over the years, Jeff Birch has stayed faithful to the legacy of his father, a humanist and trailblazing ecologist, and putting his roots before desires for expansion. The unusual story of this family is now entwined with the fate of the island, thanks to the figure of Peter Douglas, Jeff Birch's adopted brother and an important personality in environmental politics in Andros.
I became a part of the Birch family in the 1970s, and Dick became like a father figure in my life, and Small Hope became my home. I grew up under Dick's philosophy, and one of the wonderful things about Dick's philosophy growing up here at Small Hope Bay was the fact that he always said, You know, do not disturb nature more than you have to. I later on got into politics, and one of my main drive when I got into local politics was to protect some of this beautiful natural environment that Andros have. One of my main jobs right now is working with the Ministry of Tourism in our country, is trying to develop a sustainable tourism model for some of our islands. And Andros is going to be one of those main islands where we develop a sustainable tourism model. Smallhook Bay is perfect for what a sustainable tourism model is. The same thing with fishing. We don't want to do no commercial fishing in certain areas. We don't want no netting, no trapping, and very sustainable fishing methods. And all of these sort of methods were discussed, and we trained the local stakeholders so that they could use these methods, appreciate the end results of these methods, and see that there's always a certain amount that you can take out. So you have a constant income and you have a constant supply instead of one time you harvest heavy and then wait for 10 years for it to all come back.
Victims of intensive fishing in other areas of the Bahamas, conchas and spiny lobsters are still plentiful in the reefs of Andros, where traditional fishing is still practiced. This generous sea that feeds man has close connections to the island. Here, the water and the land form a complex network, and the marine rivers that crisscross Andros shape the landscape. The mangroves and rainwater lakes, of which there are many on the island, create a series of varied and preserved ecosystems which make Andros so rich and unique. The endemic vegetation, mainly dominated by Caribbean pine forests, has adapted to the rocky, infertile soil which is everywhere in the Bahamas. These vast forests, where animals are rare, play a special role on Andros and are protected within the national parks, whose establishment owes much to the commitment of Peter Douglas.
If you look around and you see the pine forest here, this is part of the largest rockland pine forest left in the world. The pine forest is very important to the freshwater lands here in Andros. It keeps the water lands up to the surface, keeping the fresh water that is very vital to Andros and the Bahamas close to the surface. So the pine forest plays a very important role. It keeps the water lands in, but also it helps create the rain to put the water back. So it's a perfect balanced system.
Formed from porous coral limestone, Andros is in fact a real sponge. The ocean, which penetrates the many underground passages, comes to meet the fresh water which is kept on the surface by the vegetation. This is responsible for a surprising geological phenomenon: blue holes.
We're here at Captain Bill's Blue Hole, and blue holes are very special to Andros. These blue holes were formed during the Ice Age, when Andros was way above sea level, about 400 feet, as a big limestone plateau. And as the ice cap melts, you have the change in the pH and the acidity of the water. It found little cracks within this big limestone plateau, and it just started to work away. And when the rise and fall of the tide, the water moved up and down in a circular pattern, and we were very lucky to get these big circular blue holes on land.
These startling formations offer experienced divers the opportunity for a spectacular dive into the inner recesses of the island. On land or under the sea, there are no fewer than 200 blue holes on Andros, which have long fascinated men and inspired many legends. Feared by the island's natives, they attract explorers who seek to unravel their mysteries. In the dark depths, there is no animal life, but the bacteria present in the sediment mean that the soil is alive, and they create layers of hydrogen sulfide, which can look quite mystical. In these submerged labyrinths, stalactites prove that once the underground network at the origin of the blue holes was above ground. Rich in diversity and unspoilt nature, the largest island in the Bahamas is not greatly visited, and exploring Andros shows us tourism on a human scale.